The year was 1993. George Bush signed a peace treaty with Boris Yeltsin just before Bill Clinton was inaugurated as the 42nd President of the United States. In sports, the Dallas Cowboys won the Super Bowl in 1993 and then repeated and did it again in 1994. The first World Trade Center bombing happened in New York, and the Branch Davidian standoff happened in Waco. Closer to home, Atlanta was hit by a blizzard of unprecedented proportions, with wind chills dropping to -30 and suburbs buried under 15 inches of snow. The Food Network made its debut on cable, while Chance the Rapper, Ariana Grande, and Morgan Wallen were born that year. But the world also lost some of our brightest lights. Tennis great Arthur Ashe died of complications from HIV. Thurgood Marshall, the first African-American Supreme Court justice, passed away. Audrey Hepburn, Norman Vincent Peale, and civil rights activist Cesar Chavez were also mourned. 1993 was the year Rodney King testified against the officers who beat him, and we heard him ask the iconic question we're still working on in 2023. Can't we all just get along? The first Pentium chips were shipped by Intel. Billy Crystal hosted the Oscars, and the first Jurassic Park movie packed theaters and thrilled audiences across the country and world. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was sworn in as a Supreme Court justice, and an executive order allowed women to pilot warplanes for the very first time. The murder of Brandon Teena in Nebraska shine light on the need to fight for and protect our trans siblings. NASA repaired the Hubble Space Telescope, expanding our understanding of the universe. And in 1993, a small group of people gathered in South Atlanta to start a different kind of church called The Village.
Well, hello and welcome to The Village Online. I am so glad that you've chosen to join us. I hope you're having a great day, and I'm excited about the time we get to spend together. We are celebrating this week the 31st anniversary of the Village Church, and that seems mind-boggling to me, but I get to talk a little bit about the Village and how we came to be, and I am happy that you're with us for this little recounting of our journey, and I hope it'll be meaningful to you. Over the last week, and I do this every year, and I am always surprised, and I shouldn't be, but I really do get the same kind of emotions every year. I've looked at many old pictures, and I have reminisced about the different seasons in the history of the Village. I have laughed at some styles that I must have thought were really, really cool that I have tried to pull off during the years and realized, yikes, I'm glad that went out of style. And I have shed a lot of tears as I have thought about the journey we have been on with different families and different things that were just so joyous that it brought tears back into my eyes thinking about it, and also things that were so traumatic that I found myself with a lump in my throat, remembering how traumatic those things were, but I was getting to share them with, I think, the greatest people on the planet, people who have been a part of the Village Church. So I felt all week like I was just walking around on holy ground, and I think it would probably serve me if I just would realize, Ray, every week can be anniversary week. Every week you can be reflecting on this, because every year I roll around to this and I go through the same process and I think, my gosh, what a journey. And I'm going to be 62 in a couple of weeks. And I realized my stars, 31 years, half of those years, I have been the pastor of the Village Church. Well, let me talk to you a little bit about the founding of the church. And some of this, you probably could repeat it as well as I can say it. But I know there's always people that are coming online for the very first time. And so there's some things I just want to share that'll give you a little bit of our DNA. I was just a young guy that loved church. I started going to church when I was about 12, and I loved it. I went to a country Baptist church, and I loved the preacher. I loved everybody that I knew at that church. Just seemed to be the most wonderful people. I loved the music especially, and I felt called to be a pastor. And so at 17 years of age, I went off to college and wanted to pursue being a vocational full-time pastor of a Baptist church. And I went to Houston Baptist University in Houston, Texas. I became a part of a mega church. I'd never been a part of a big church before, but I became a part of First Baptist Church Houston. Their pastor became a mentor to me. At 19, the university asked me if I would go and speak at a church that was pastorless. And I said I sure would. I had been speaking at missions in and around Houston many nights of the week. I would go and preach, but didn't preach much at churches. So I went to a little church 30 minutes south of Houston, Rosenberg, Texas, and I preached a Sunday morning sermon. And they asked me if I would come back and preach the next week. And I went back and preached the next week. And then I preached the next week. And then they said, would you be our pastor? And I was way out of my depths. I was 19 years old. But one of the things about being young, you don't know you're out of your depths because you think that you have it all together. You can do it. So I said, absolutely. So I was married and had a little boy that was on the way. And I became pastor of the Second Baptist Church of Rosenberg, Texas. From there, I moved to Bogalusa to go to graduate school in New Orleans. I pastored the Main Street Baptist Church in Bogalusa, Louisiana, where Ethan was born, and then moved from seminary to Atlanta to pastor my third church, Liberty Baptist Church. And at Liberty, I went through a divorce. And suddenly I thought ministry for me was over. It's all I'd ever wanted to do. It's all I'd ever thought about was being a pastor. But divorce was outside of the lines of what a pastor could ever be. And so I didn't argue with that. I didn't think that that was wrong. I just thought, this is my life. I have screwed up by going through a divorce, and so now I am sidelined, and I'll never be able to be a pastor again. I kept attending, of course, going to church, taking my little boys every Sunday to church, and I'd sit and just feel more grief than you can imagine because I was thinking, I was called to do this. I was called to help people, and but because I'd gone through tragedy of divorce, I was sitting on the side. I took the boys to a thing in Gatlinburg one year, and at that event in Gatlinburg, an evangelist who had cerebral palsy, David Ring, he spoke. And I knew these things, but have you ever known something but not really applied it to your life? You know it intellectually, but you never really have it internalized for you. Here's what David Ring said, and I won't try to imitate his voice, but it was very broken because of the cerebral palsy. He said in the course of his talk,
God don't throw away broken things. God uses broken things.
And for some reason, that is the most elementary thought in the world, and I know I knew it, but I didn't really know it, because I remember sitting there in a darkened arena with my two little boys beside me, and I remember thinking, my life isn't over. I just have to be willing to let God use me and fix me and help me become healed and whole. And that was transformational. It seems so elementary now, I almost am afraid to say it because I don't want you to think, golly, he was an idiot. Well, a little, I guess I was. But I left that event and I came home and I thought, you know what? I need to be telling people the story that God doesn't throw away broken things. God fixes and uses broken things. And I put a music group together, and some of the best singers around. Y'all know Bonita. I have another friend, Doug Mauldin. He was one of the singers, and we had a great group, and we traveled all over the South. We were called Second Chance, and it all revolved around that story of God showing me that he doesn't throw away broken things. He fixes and uses. If I had to rename the group, I wouldn't call it Second Chance. I'd call it Another Chance, because I've discovered it happens repeatedly in your life when you need another opportunity because it didn't turn out the way you'd hoped and you've fallen and it just wasn't what you'd hoped it would be. But I discovered God was a God of another chance. During this time, a church called me to be their music director, and I was so happy. I thought, I'm not the pastor, but that's all right. I can lead music, and I can hopefully bring some joy into people's lives, and I can be in the middle of church life, and I love that. And so I helped a church launch in Fayetteville, Georgia, and that was great. I would invite my friends to come to church, and these friends that I had met since I was a pastor, they would come, and they would say to me, Ray, we don't exactly get the service. It's not really for us, but we love you, and we appreciate what you're trying to do, and just keep us in the loop. If you ever decide to do anything, let us know. We'd love to support you any way we can. Well, during this time, I remember having a encounter, and I'm not really, I don't have a lot of these encounters in my life. Wish I could tell you that I did, but I don't. But I remember there was an encounter in my life when I sensed God saying to me, Ray, you will be a pastor to people who don't have a pastor. And I can truthfully say that is the one thing that I have never doubted in the last, my gosh, it's been 35 years, I guess. I have never doubted that something outside of my mind I had never thought of in my life actually began to resonate in my brain, so much so that I thought, this feels divine. It feels as if a divine voice is speaking to me. Ray, you will be a pastor to people who do not have a pastor. And so suddenly I began to think, that's what my life is supposed to be. Sure, I can keep being the music director. That's all right. But I'm supposed to pastor people who don't have a pastor. And so I immediately began to do funerals for people who didn't have a pastor. I just put my name out there, and if anybody didn't have a pastor, I would rush there and try to help them any way I could. I began to do weddings for people that didn't have a pastor. And I began to cherish that responsibility. I thought, this is lovely. I get to do something that I really feel like God has called me to do. But I never thought about starting a church. But as that resonated with me over time, as the weeks and the months went by, I began to think, maybe I'm supposed to call these people together on Sundays. Maybe that's something that I'm supposed to do. And so without a supporting group, I didn't have a church that said, we want to start a mission and we're going to set this up. It honestly was me and a few family members, and who said, yeah, Ray, we believe that you are called. We believe this is something that could be a good thing. We'll help. And we started a little church called the Village Church 31 years ago. We started it in a storefront in Hale Haven Shopping Center. And people say, what? Run that by me again? Hale, H-A-L-E. That would have been weird if it was Hale, but it was Hale Haven Shopping Center. And we started the church, and it was, from the beginning, it was different. It was loving and good. And we had 89 people our first service because I wrote to all of these people that I had been given the privilege of being their pastor. They didn't have a pastor. So I wrote to all of them and said, hey, I'm starting a church. Would love for you to come. And so many of them came, 89 the first Sunday. And it became a really wonderful thing. We were in a small storefront in a big shopping center, and we grew and we filled that space. And Eckerd's Drugs was right next door to us. And they moved out, and so we took over their space, moved our auditorium into Eckerd's, built a big stage, had the lights, and I did all that kind of stuff, and used the existing space we had been in for our children's space. Then there was a bingo hall to the other side of where Eckerd's had been, and the lady that owned the bingo hall decided she would hang it up after, 20 or 30 years of being there. So we took over this huge bingo hall, and that became the Village Jam, which was our youth facility. And Jane, who did not know me at all back then, but she would bring Jenna, her daughter, over to the Jam because that was on Friday nights. That was a happening, rock out kind of a Christian youth ministry venue. And we were just rocking along. It was really wonderful time. And we had that for 5 or 6 years. That's what was going on. And then I remember getting a phone call from the owner of the shopping center saying, Ray, you've been a wonderful tenant. We love you guys so much, but we are putting a big country western bar in where the grocery store used to be, and it's going to dominate the entire shopping center, and we think we don't want to continue with the lease that we have with you. We are saying that we're going to take that space and we're going to do some other things with it. We don't think a church would be a really good fit for this time. And so suddenly I was looking at 60 days without a facility. And to say it was devastating and scary, overwhelming, all of those things, so true. I experienced anxiety. For the second time in my life, I experienced severe anxiety because I thought, these people have come along with me as their pastor, and I don't have anywhere to take them. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. It was really frightening. I actually had to go on medication for a short period of time because I was just thinking, this is the most devastating news. I remember going around and looking for places, and I couldn't find anything that would fit our church, our growing church. And so we didn't know what to do exactly. We started having church on Saturday nights. I found a church building, a church that was struggling financially, and they said we could meet at their place on Saturday nights and we could pay them some rent. And so our church went on Saturday nights to church, and it was good. We all hung together. We all believed it was a good thing we were doing. We didn't know what was going to happen next. We were just saying, God, you're going to have to show us. And we would have Saturday night service. And then I remember we had a service, one particular service, where at the end of the service, a gentleman said, "Can I say a word, Pastor?" I said, "Sure." I did not know who he was. And he stood up and he said, "I have built a church on 26 acres close to here." And he said, "I feel like we need to give that church to you." And I don't know if he actually said it that way. What I heard was they want to give us the church. I later learned they wanted to sell us the church, but it didn't matter. I still was just blown away at the message that this man stands up. I don't know who he is. After the service, I get to know him. The next week, I actually go and I look at 26 acres on Jodico Road, beautiful place that had a church building already built on it. He had established a church there. It had been there for just a few months, and they had encountered some difficulties, and they were needing to sell the building. And so our problem was we didn't have any money. We had lived always just week to week, never had been about the money. We needed enough to keep the lights on. That's kind of just lived like that. We didn't have a reserve. And so I discovered, having never made a big purchase, that this was going to take $89,000 down, and then we would have to finance the rest. And we'd have to have people who would step up. If we could come up with $89,000, we were going to have some people really seriously step up. And again, anxiety, nervousness, not knowing how this was going to work out, because I don't think we had ever taken an offering more than a few $100s. To go from a few $100s to $89,000 it's almost insurmountable. But I really learned a lot during that time. We had one businessman, a very famous Christian businessman that had built a large business, the nationwide business, and he had gifted us a few times in our short history. He had gifted us with chairs and things like that. And I wrote to him thinking maybe this would be the answer. And he wrote back, or his secretary wrote back, and they were no longer doing things like that. They had a foundation now that would be doing other things, but they were not able to help. And I remember going on this church property, and I remember walking way back in the woods, and I remember thinking, God, what's going to happen? I don't even know what's going to happen. And I remember a sense that it was going to be okay, that I just needed to trust it was going to be okay. So we put the date together. We said we're trying to raise $89,000. And some people kind of passed the word around that they were going to get small family loans. We had some people that were going to get some small loans, and some others who had a few $1,000s in the bank that they were willing to give. And lo and behold, the day came for us to have that Saturday night service and then receive that offering, so we would know that we were going to be able to get the building. And this wasn't actually receiving an offering. It was pieces of paper with how much cash they were going to be able to give for this one-time offering. And when it was calculated, it was over $89,000. And we were able to buy the property in Stockbridge. And it was just amazing. And so we were able to move in, kind of villageize the space, make it beautiful. And the ministry continued to flourish. It was a great time. Then back about 15, 16 years ago, I had moved into Atlanta, into East Point, but I'd moved into Atlanta. Our ministry was good, but it wasn't so much of what we had done that we were innovative in seemed to be kind of the way churches were doing it all around us. And I was beginning to lose a little bit of the feel for the suburbs as much as I was feeling what I was feeling living in the city. And so I said, I think we need to start the Village planted up here in Metro Atlanta. And we had some people who said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. We want to help. And so a small group of people about 15, 16 years ago moved to Hapeville, and we launched the Village Church in Hapeville. And that has been an incredible journey for us. We first moved into a space that was a small space, but a beautiful space. And I remember we'd have 2 or 3 Sunday services because the space was so small, but it was intimate and it was good. I think we had 6 or 7 Christmas Eve services one year just to hold the people that were coming. And then we had received word that Don Jackson's Spartan Lincoln Mercury, a big car dealership, was available to possibly rent. And I went over and talked to Mr. Jackson, and he said he would rent it to us. And we began renting the building. And then he came to me and said, Ray, I'd like to sell the building to you. And so I said, that's amazing. And so that's what we did. And that's what we've been doing for the last 15 years. And it has been an amazing thing. And we have had some incredible times together. We've shared so many things with people over the last really 31 years, but I was just thinking about all the different things going on. I think about the deaths that we have helped people process, the weddings we have celebrated, the births we have celebrated. I think about the small groups that have met in people's homes. I've thought about youth ministry. There was a season when we had one of the best youth ministries of any church around. We had incredible children's ministry. We went on men's retreats and women's retreats, and the Village Cafe. I remember when it was born and it became a place where people could gather on Sunday mornings around incredible breakfast. When we moved to Hapeville, it became the Village Cafe, but it fed large numbers of people who didn't have places to live, who were living on the streets. There's no joy like walking in and seeing 30, 40, 50 homeless men and women eating on a Sunday morning and being served by villagers, but we experienced that. It was incredible. I'd forgotten about this, but we started a food ministry called Feed My People Food Ministry. It actually started, one couple in our church had an interest in doing that, and it started, and then another lady came on, and as she came on, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. It actually grew to one of the largest food ministries in Metro Atlanta, so much so that I called them in and said, we need to separate you guys from the church because you guys are so big and so effective that it doesn't make sense that you're not reaching out in an even bigger way and being your own nonprofit. And so was able to help them do that. I looked up the information today. They currently serve 6 million meals a year to the poor, and that started at the Village Church. Blown away. We did picnics and baptisms and baby dedications, and it's all been an amazing ride. And over the last week, I have been able to reflect on many of those things that I have experienced over the last 31 years. I moved to East Point. I met Jane at the Village, which has been one of the greatest highlights of my life. And relocating to Hapeville has been for us an incredible blessing as a church. I want to share some observations that I have about our church. And then I hope to tie this up with where I think we're moving into the future that I'm very excited about. And this will be new information for most of you. So let me just share quickly some observations. First observation, our heartbeat for 31 years as the Village Church has always been for the person who feels they are an outsider. I have tried to think about it and say, am I missing it? Is that, and no, that has honestly been, and I think it comes from, Ray, you will be a pastor to people who don't have a pastor. There's been a sense that there are people who walk through the doors of churches and they feel alienated for whatever reason. Maybe it's a good reason, maybe it's not a good reason, who knows? I just know there are people that walk through the door and they feel like nobody knows me. I don't fit in this place. This place cannot be for me. I know many times we don't hear what people outside the church are saying, but at the Village, I believe we have tried to listen. What are they saying? What are they feeling? I know that when I was the young whippersnapper preacher that felt like he was just going to be destined to be one of the great pastors in the world. I mean, I had all the confidence in the world, but I pretty much thought anywhere I walked in, I belonged anywhere. But then I went through a divorce, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I belonged. I walked in and I felt like they're judging me. People are judging me. People don't know the story, or maybe they think they know the story, but they are judging me. And I discovered I felt almost like I was persona non grata. I wasn't really needed. Nobody really wanted me. And I began to talk to people and realized, oh my gosh, other people feel that way too. It was weird being single. I'd always been in a married world, and suddenly going to church single, that felt like a strange thing. But it made me start listening to people. I listened, and I tried to trust and believe what they were saying to me was true. I didn't try to be defensive about the church. I tried to say, tell me about your experience, and I began to really take it to heart. To me, the most beautiful thing in the world is when someone feels welcomed and accepted, and when they're able to walk through the doors of a church without feeling judged. And I cannot tell you the number of people who have said those exact words. When we walked through the door of the church for the first time, we felt like we were not judged. We were accepted for who we are. Our crowd has always been a different kind of crowd. Back in the early days, I always thought we were a little bit rougher and tougher maybe than some church crowds. I don't know what that was about, except we were, I think in the way that we started the church, we made it really open to people who didn't have a church background. And so a lot of the people kind of were rough around the edges. They didn't have that church etiquette. Maybe they would cuss in the parking lot. They would you cut them off in the parking lot, and they maybe give you the finger. I mean, they were still learning stuff. They were rough. That evolved, and we began to have people come to our church who had experienced hurt in churches, and they came to our church. Many just came to heal. It's amazing to me over 31 years the number of people who came to our church for a season just to heal some hurt they had experienced, and they felt like it was a safe place to heal, and then they would move on, and there were no strings attached. We were happy that they saw our place as a place that helped them, and then they moved on. And of course, I never even knew way back when, pastor to people who don't have a pastor, I had no idea that that would eventually open up to the LGBT world, and I would get to be a pastor to some of the most amazing human beings on the planet. If you had asked me back in 1990, Ray, would you think you'll be a pastor to LGBT people? I would have said, I don't even know what you're talking about. But over time, that openness to people, suddenly the LGBT community discovered the Village, and that has been for me one of the great, great joys of my life. Another observation, our commitment has evolved over the last 31 years to focus on the great commandments, love God, love neighbor, love self, and to make sure that we remember the letter of the law kills, but it's the spirit that brings life. As I thought about our church, I thought, that seems to me to be kind of theologically the big deal to us. We're going to focus every week, we're going to focus on love God, love your neighbor, and love yourself. One aspect of that, we're going to be hitting that all the time. You got to learn to love yourself. You got to learn to love yourself. Get rid of the shame. It's not going to help you. You're human. The mistakes you've made are human. Love yourself. As you learn to love yourself, as you learn to accept love from the divine, learn to love other people. Let that flow through you. Those are the things that we're going to focus on. And we are never going to let the Bible divide us. We are never going to let the Bible be something that we beat somebody over the head with. We are going to know in our heart of hearts that the letter of the law kills, but the Spirit is what brings life. And so we think churches have that all mixed up when they think they are supposed to take the Bible as a rule book they are totally missing the beauty of what the Bible is supposed to be. I believe this way of approaching things has helped us understand the Bible better. It's helped us embrace people more, and for that I'm very grateful. Another observation, and this has been humbling, and I think this all the time, but I think during an anniversary week, I especially think about it. No church, organization, or leader can make it 31 years without a whole lot of help along the way. Being the senior leader, I get a lot of pats on the back. I get a lot of affirmation. I get a lot of people saying, boy, Ray, that was incredible. You were so great, blah, 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 blah. And all of that stuff feels good. All that stuff feels good. I don't want to say that it doesn't. It does. But I've been around long enough to know that the Village Church is way, way, way more than Ray. It is way more than Ray and Jane. It is a whole bunch of people who have come along and fallen in love with the idea, the vision, and have joined on the journey and have made the village what it is today. They say if you see a turtle on a fence post, you know it didn't get up there by itself. When you see a leader who has had some semblance of some kind of success, you can pretty much guarantee that they didn't get there by themselves. I am a great example of someone who did not get there by myself. The village didn't get where it is today by itself. There was a whole lot of people who have worked behind the scenes to make it what it is. I think about people in the early days who stepped up. I think about my dad and stepmom who were so supportive in those early years, so supportive. If a piece of equipment needed to be bought, if a keyboard needed to be purchased, if something needed to be done, then they were always there to strike a check. That was huge. You have no earthly idea how huge that was. And then there was always a faithful group of people. I remember the first two tithing families we had in our church, families that gave 10% of their income, although their incomes were not very large. They were working single moms, and they were the first two. I never will forget. They were the first two, and they gave every week. You could just count on a check coming in from Shirley and a check coming in from Jeannie every single week, and they were single moms just figuring out how to make it. But they were so huge. I think about people in our church today. I think about the encouragement I have received from so many people in our church who have said, whatever you need, just let me know. If you need it, I'll be there. I'll do anything you need. And one of the things that they have done for me is they have encouraged me when I have been a little discouraged. They have encouraged me, and they know who they are. I thought about listing them. In fact, I have a list, but then I've realized there's a chance I maybe could have left somebody off, and I wouldn't want to let anybody off this list that hasn't been there for me. There's so many who've been there, even online. People like David McCart encouraging me online. Robbie Myrick from Alabama encouraging me online. Gordy from California encouraging me online. Don and Barbara Bay from South Georgia encouraging me. Cheryl Cannon Groves, Texas, encouraging me. Rick Young, I think it just slipped my mind. He's Michigan or Ohio or somewhere, but Rick Young. Ron Capes, a pastor that I admire greatly. These are people that watch the services, and then they encourage me, and they say, Ray, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need? And those people have made the difference. It is a privilege to get to be the person that articulates often the message for the church, but it is the people around who make it work. And I think about our media team. I think about the things Neil Campbell has done to make our message come out and really pop. And I think people see me on the screen, but they don't realize what happened to get me there. They have no idea what's going on behind. I think of Derek and Lou, two of the sweetest guys I've ever known, and showing up early on Sundays to make sure that things run as flawlessly as they can run. And they are the people that help make things happen. And so for that, I'm very grateful. I'm filled with gratitude for each person who's helped us along the way. Our future depends on people stepping up and saying, we believe in the village ideal so much that we'll do whatever we can do. We'll do whatever. If it means striking a check, we'll strike a check. If it means picking up somebody and driving them to a service, we will be the carrier. We'll chauffeur the person. We will do whatever it takes to help the village move forward. For that, I'm grateful. Another observation. The journey has not always been easy, but in retrospect, it has always been worth it. There have been enormous disappointments, sadnesses, attendance when we start off at 89 and then we go to 50 and then 35 and then 17. And it's like, good gracious, I'm leading this in the wrong direction. I didn't think it was going to be like this. And then realizing that ebbs and flows and that comes and goes and attendances can go up and they can go down. But it's disappointing. So certainly there are seasons like that. Realizing that we used to have a bench in the lobby. We called it the mourner's bench because we were so big on inviting people to church. And we need to get better at that, by the way. I need to begin to talk about that more because we would talk about how life-changing it could be if a friend came and the message really resonated with them and their spirit really was touched. And I would see people in the lobby and they had invited their friends and they'd be sitting on this little bench in the lobby just waiting for their friends to get here. And then the friends would have stood them up. And I remember seeing the sadness on their face as they would get off that bench and they would come into the auditorium for church. But I remember thinking how beautiful too it was that they were doing their best to try to get people to a place where they thought it could be healing and healthy and whole for them. There's a lot of disappointment. Of course, there's been pain too. There's been deaths to people. We've had some enormously painful deaths in our church family. We had someone that was very involved in our media ministry many years ago, 20 years ago, and he took his life after writing a letter to me telling me how much the church meant to him, how much I meant to him, and how much the village praise team meant to him, and then he took his life. I remember how devastating that was. We had a youth minister that died on an Easter Sunday morning en route to the hospital in the prime of life, I think 40, 45 years old. Beautiful lady who she had been just such a mother figure to our youth in Hapeville. She had reached out to all of these Hapeville kids, and she died. And I had to announce that at the end of the Easter service when I was told the news, and I had to tell the church. And then none of us moved. We just sat in the auditorium and wept through the afternoon. And I remember kids that were part of that youth group, just tears rolling down their faces. They're in shock. Sherry is gone. Been so many things like that have happened, but it's been worth it. It's been worth it to be able to walk through the highs and lows of people's lives. That there's nothing like it. It is a beautiful experience, and that's a great thing, which has led me to also realize there's no master plan. Maybe there's some churches that have incredible master plans and it's drawn out and they know what they're going to be doing 5 years from now, 10 years from now. That's never been the story of the village. It has been a season-to-season thing as we've tried to listen to what the Spirit maybe would be saying about what we should do and what we should be looking towards. Which leads me to talk about something quickly I want to talk about, which is how I see the village. I see the village in 3 stages. I see the village in what I'm going to call Village 1.0. And when I talk about the Village 1.0, that is that early suburban stage. Actually, the first 15 years of our church's life. We were located outside the perimeter. Most everybody lived within 10 miles of the church. Think about what a blessing that is. Children's ministry, you've got schools, you know where everybody's going to school. They're all connected. Youth ministry, we had 2 big high schools that we were able to draw from, and we had strong people from each of those high schools that created a dynamic youth ministry. It was very cool. Another aspect about the Village 1.0, we were evangelical. We were never political, and we were never unkind, but we were unaware for the most part about people who struggle the most, the poor and the marginalized. That wasn't really a part of what we thought about. We were just a good, kind evangelical church. We were creative. We had some of the most creative people I had ever been associated with, and they made our services very creative. And we had a very hopeful spirit. That was the Village 1.0. But then we moved to Hapeville, and we became the Village 2.0. We suddenly were inside the perimeter. For those outside of Atlanta, the perimeter is 285. It goes around the city. And inside the perimeter is a different vibe from outside of the perimeter. We became very diverse, very diverse. We were what I would call post-evangelical. For those who need a definition, a post-evangelical church is characterized by a departure from some of the rigid doctrines and cultural norms of traditional evangelism or evangelicalism. embracing a more open, inclusive, and socially engaged approach to Christianity. That's what we became, a very post-evangelical church. And most people live at least 30 minutes away from the church. Most people who are active at our church live at least 30 minutes away. Mark and Joy come from Brooks, Georgia. Alan and Alex come from Toccoa, Georgia. Augusto and Marissa from Duluth. David McCart, McDonough. Ethan and Rachel, Sharpsburg. Jason and Deanna and Tricia, Noonan. Alejandro and Matthew, Chambly. Enoch and Preety, Mableton. Pat Baker, Marnie, Rachel, they're all from Hapeville. They're the only ones that we have that are close, those three. Norvine, McDonough, Gwen, Stockbridge, Marshall and Stephanie, they used to live in Ackworth, commuting to our church. Now they live in Morrow, where Joe Carr lives. Anita Hodo, Jonesboro, Shakira and April, they drive an incredibly long way from Villa Rica. Lauren has a new house in Fairburn. Derek in Fairburn, Jerry Simmons, Powder Springs, Lou in Austell, Daryl and Kinsey, and Courtney and Lauren in Decatur. The Hoods commute from Tyrone. Blake and Eddie from Buckhead. Y'all, people come from all over the place to get to the Village. In the Village 2.0, we are a fully affirming and inclusive church. That's different from the Village in those first 15 years. We are fully affirming and inclusive of all humans. We're more social justice aware. And I've got to say, this has been the most wonderful season of ministry for me. As I reflect back, the last years have been the most joy-filled, as I have had the privilege of being around younger people who just are lighting up with the idea of following Christ and loving people and creating this inclusive, beautiful community called the Village. But there has been one thing that has been troublesome to Jane and me, and that has been the ownership of the big, massive property known as the Village in Hapeville. When we moved at Hapeville, it was unbelievable trying to get our arms around even how to clean it up, because it was a city block wide of properties, and it had been a car dealership. And so the large spaces where we have our auditorium now, it had been a garage. For 50 years, it had been a garage, and you can't imagine how hard it was to try to figure out how to clean it and how to make it into something that is beautiful and is good. But we did it. With a lot of people working, we did it. And then we tried to develop the space and tried to figure out how we get the children's space right, how we get a youth space right. We tried to do all those things. Then during COVID, we actually remodeled and trying to bring it up to where we could have renters that would somehow or another be able to take some of the burden of the enormous property that we had. And it has been overwhelming. And I never would think about us getting rid of the space, because for some reason, I thought I had to have the space. We had to have the space. But over the last few months, as Jane and I have been honest about our lives, we have said, you know what? The Village uses this space for 3 hours on Sundays. And yet, it is creating heartache, heartbreak, stress, enormous pain, especially for Jane, trying to figure out how to pay the bills with no money. 20, 30, 40 hours a week of nightmare headaches, trying to figure out how do we keep the building. And finally, a months ago, it hit me, we don't need to keep the building. We do not need to keep the building. Which leads me to what I think is going to be the most exciting stage ever in the life of the Village, and I'm calling it simply the Village 3.0. And we put the buildings on the market a few months ago. And we expect that we will hear in the next months that somebody is wanting to purchase them, and we will not have our Sunday morning space anymore. But we will rent a space, and that space, we will use it for the 2 to 3 hours, and we won't be thinking about it 1 second on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It will be what it's supposed to be, a space for us on Sunday. Not only will we rent a space, the day might come when we rent a space for a service here, and then the next week, maybe we go to another rented space for a service here. And then maybe the next week go to another space here where we actually are able to spread our wings a little bit around Atlanta. Not sure if it's going to work like that. I know we're going to initially start out with a space rented in the Hapeville area. And then as we see how that goes, we may be looking at seeing if we can stretch out just a little bit further and see what it would look like to have several spaces that we could meet in on Sundays, including Jane and I want the church to come to our house maybe once every month or two, where we would have an opportunity to have a service and music and message and then lunch together. And our house does that well. We think that would work. I've asked Mark and Joy Conklin if they thought we could ever have a service at their house one Sunday. They live kind of a distance, 45 minutes away. We'd have to work on getting some rides maybe for some people. But I think in the summertime, I would love to have a service there. And then for people who wanted to enjoy the pool and Mark's grilling, I think that would make an incredible Sunday. So I'm saying all this to say the Village 3.0 is going to be how the Village kind of evolves into the future, and it's going to revolve around rented spaces and not the central home base that has become such a burden to us trying to figure out how to manage just the facility that is very old and has a lot of problems, and with taxes and all the things that has become a reality for us, it has become too much, and we've decided that we needed to move to something that makes a lot more sense. Well, I'm excited about all of that, and I'm excited that I'm sharing this with you. Many of you I've talked to on the side, but I wanted to be able to share it with you in a personal talk, and I hope this makes sense. And I just want you to know I've got some other things that I want to share, but I think that's probably all I have time for today, is just sharing that with you. We're on the Village 3.0. We'll keep you posted on what that means, and we are super excited about these. You see, I think I'm supposed to be the pastor to people who don't have a pastor for my whole life. I'm 60, about to be 62. I don't think that stops for me. I think that as long as you will let me be a pastor, and as long as you let me be your pastor, then that's what I'm supposed to be. And I'm so happy about that, and I'm happy about getting to walk this road with you. I did want to share with you this. We have had some bills that have come in along websites that we try to keep up for the Village Church, Everybody Church. And so there's been some expenses there, and there's been some expenses as it relates to us getting online, making sure that we're able to bring the best quality of what we're trying to do to you online. And so if you could give to that, that would be a huge blessing. We're going to get better at articulating that, because I think you want to help, and we just haven't shared the need like we should. But I think as we move into Village 3.0, we're going to be sharing that need. And if you can help us, we'd appreciate it. You can send a check if you'd like to the Village Church, and the information will be on the screen. And if you could help us, that would be a great, great blessing. And just know it takes a lot to be able to present what we present each week, and you being a support partner would be something very, very meaningful. Well, there's so many other things I wanted to say. I wanted to be able to do a little section about how great Jane has been as a partner to me, but you know that already, right? She's my best friend, and she's my partner in ministry, and I love her, and I'm very proud that we get to walk this road together. And I'm really proud that we celebrate 31 years as the Village Church. Would you pray with me, please? Gracious and loving God, today my heart is so full of gratitude as we celebrate 31 years of your faithfulness, your guidance, your blessings upon our church family. From our little beginnings as a suburban evangelical church, you have led us on a transformative journey, shaping us into a vibrant and diverse family that welcomes all people from every corner of Atlanta, and even shines a bright light into the corners of our country and the world. We thank you for the many ways you have expanded our vision, opening our hearts to embrace inclusivity, justice, and love in every form. We celebrate the beautiful tapestry of backgrounds, stories, and experiences that each member brings to this community, reflecting the richness of your creation. As we continue to grow together, may we always strive to be a beacon of hope and a sanctuary of peace for all who seek refuge and connection. Thank you for the people who have made this place so special. Thank you for Those people, I don't even want to call their name right now, but they know who they are, who have just been a blessing to us and been a blessing to the Village Church. Thank you for them. Thank you for their lives. And I just pray that the Village will continue to be that beautiful church community that I think you gave birth to 31 years ago. And I thank you for this prayer in Christ's name. Amen.
Well, hello, my friend. I know you don't like when the spotlight is on you. But please, if you would, sit back, relax, and close your eyes if you need to. 'Cause I'm gonna take a moment to say what I know is true. Not everyone can change the world, but there are people who do. So thank you for living life with love. Thank you for lifting people up. Thank you for all the good you have done. You made a difference. You have known loss, you have known wins. From start to end, you've stayed humble. You've been a good leader, you've been a good friend, and picked people up when they've stumbled. You go about your days not seeking any fanfare or fame, but